All right, so welcome everybody. It's so great to see all of you here. This afternoon we have a great panel. So this is the first panel of the day for our two-day People's Assembly Building Beyond Bernie events. And my name is Cheng-Sim Lim. I'm a Bernie Sanders delegate to the Democratic National Convention from Los Angeles, California. All of us involved in organizing this panel would like to thank the co-sponsors of this event, DSA LA Healthcare Justice Committee, Healthcare for All LA Chapter, Progressive Asia Network for Action, or PANA, and Physicians for a National Health Program, or PNHP, Southern California. We also have a program update. We heard yesterday from Patrice Cullors' office that due to an urgent personal matter, Ms. Cullors will unfortunately not be able to participate in the panel discussion as originally planned. So we send our best wishes to her. We have taken the opportunity, however, to feature someone from the new emerging generation of Medicare for All activists, inspired by Bernie's push for Medicare for All in 2016 and 2020. You'll see when I introduce the panelists. But before I do that, I'd like to go over the sequence of this panel discussion. So we will introduce the panelists first. After that, we will have about 20 to 25 minutes of the panelists addressing why we need single payer in California. This why discussion will be moderated by Gina Harris. Gina is a nurse, activist, member of the LA County Party Central Committee, and a fellow Bernie delegate. And this will be followed by another 20 to 25 minutes of the panelists addressing how to win single payer in California. This how discussion will be moderated by Erica Farriston. Erica is the co-director and co-chair of Healthcare for All, president of the Pacific Palisades Democratic Club, a California Democratic delegate since 2017, and a Democratic socialist. Then after Erica, we will open the floor for 20 minutes of questions from the audience. So either Gina or Erica will call on you to ask your question. We ask that you add your name to the queue to ask questions by doing the following. If you're in a Zoom meeting, please raise your hand. You will see at the bottom of your Zoom screen a participant's symbol. Click on that symbol, and at the bottom of the column that pops up, you'll see a green hand symbol. Click on the hand symbol to raise your hand. If you're calling in from a phone, press *9. If you're watching a live stream on YouTube, Facebook, etc., you can type your question into the chats of the respective streams. So each person will have up to 1 minute to ask their question. We will be strict, very strict, in enforcing the 1 minute limit. You will be muted if you exceed 1 minute. Please keep yourself muted when you're not talking, and you can do that by clicking off the microphone symbol on the bottom left of your screen. And now that we've gone over the housekeeping announcements, I'd like to share a little background of how the People's Assembly Building Beyond Bernie came to be. A number of us Bernie delegates decided about a month ago that instead of being frustrated with our lack of agency as delegates and the DNC platform, that we could take this little window of time as delegates to act affirmatively, positively. We decided that we should get together with grassroots activists working outside the Democratic Party to put forward our own grassroots-driven agenda. And this weekend of action is the result. And our actions address key issues that have been omitted or are inadequately addressed in the DNC platform. A glaring omission in the party platform is, of course, single payer Medicare for all. I don't have to remind you, we're living in the middle of a pandemic that has disproportionately ravaged Black, Latinx, Indigenous, and Pacific Islander communities. As California delegates, we have to ask if Medicare for all has a longer horizon nationally because we don't have President Bernie Sanders. What about California, the largest state in the country, with an economy that outranks the United Kingdom? We have a governor in office who campaigned as a supporter of single payer. Can we hold him accountable and do here what Saskatchewan did for Canada? I'm going to introduce to you now our distinguished panelists who bring a rich and varied range of experiences to bear on the question of why and how to win single payer in California. Akili has over 50 years of experience as a labor and community organizer and political leader. Dennis, could you spotlight Akili?
I hope this is him because his name right here. I'll just do it.
He's listed as Baba Akili.
Yes.
Yay, good to
Baba
see you.
Akili.
Yeah. So Akili has dedicated his life to social and racial justice. He is the director of the Fannie Lou Hamer Institute and an organizer with Black Lives Matter LA. In preparing for today's event, Akili shared a newspaper article about him doing a single-payer town hall in Oklahoma in 1993. And he's quoted in the article saying, "Single payer is better than the then-in-the-works Clinton health proposal. This is the measure of Akili's endurance and commitment to the cause of single payer." Kalkidan Alemayehu is a recent high school graduate who will be attending UCLA this fall. So Dennis, could you spotlight Kalkidan? As a young progressive advocate, she has been working with the Ethiopian Democratic Club of Los Angeles, advocating for Ethiopian Americans in LA on a plethora of issues, one of which is Medicare for all. She has advocated for Black students at her high school as the president of the Black Student Union. Inspired by Bernie's campaign in 2016 and 2020, she describes herself as a, quote, fierce believer in single payer, unquote, and is the student liaison now for Healthcare for All LA chapter. Maureen Cruz is a former LA County clinic nurse, the current co-director of Healthcare for All LA chapter. Maureen has experience as a program coordinator working in LAUSD, a research associate at UCLA, and was the 50th Assembly District Executive Board member of the California Democratic Party. I will add that Maureen is probably the staunchest advocate of single payer that I know. Maria Estrada is an activist from Southeast Los Angeles and is on the board of the Native Women's Unity Association and one of the founders of Compton for Bernie. She has organized actions throughout the LA area addressing immigration rights, human rights, indigenous rights, environmental justice, healthcare for all, and numerous issues affecting her community. She is also running for state assembly in the 63rd district against the Speaker of the Assembly, who shelved SB 562, the single payer healthcare bill, and came within 9 points of him in the 2018 general election. Maria is currently campaigning throughout the Southeast area and has been volunteering her time working at food banks and providing resources to her community. And finally, the last panelist, Dr. Paul Song, is a board-certified radiation oncologist and progressive activist. He was most recently on the faculty of the Samuel Ocean Cancer Center at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center and currently volunteers part-time seeing Medicaid and uninsured patients at Dignity California Hospital. Dr. Song is president of the California chapter of Physicians for a National Health Program. He served as the first visiting fellow on healthcare policy in the California Department of Insurance in 2013 and was co-chair of the campaign for a Healthy California Coalition during the SB 562 fight. Dr. Song serves on the national board of PNHP and Progressive Democrats of America. He was recently a national surrogate for the Bernie Sanders campaign. So welcome to all our panelists. We are so honored to have you all here today. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Gina Harris to start the panel discussion.
All righty. I'm going to give a couple of caveats right now. I have 2 cats and they know that I'm doing something, and so now they're being needy. So this is the string that came in our DNC swag bag that came with for our keepsake credential, and they love this string. So I think my cats are more thankful to the DNC than I am right now. So I'm going to try and throw this string for them so that they go away. So if you hear meowing, I apologize. They're just being so needy. But I wanted to say a fun fact before we get into the questions that just happened this morning at the Urban Partners Food Bank, where Erica and I were at 6 o'clock this morning. So we are definitely people who will walk the talk. But I talked to Assemblymember Santiago, who was there, and he shows up. He actually, you know, does some work. And I asked them, what does Gavin want to give us single payer? What does he want? That is my question. I'm very straight shooter. And he told me 330 billion. And I said, well, does he have Venmo? And, you know, the reason why I'm asking this is because, you know, right now we're in the Healthy California Commission hearings and all that jazz going on. To me, it's a waste of time. But I want to know, what is it that, you know, what is it going to take you assembly members? What is it going to take our governor to just jump on board and say, okay, if it's 330 billion, like I said, okay, I'll find it and I'll Venmo you. But that is a conversation for another time. I just thought I'd share that funniness with you because that just happened this morning. And I thought it was kind of funny to see his face when I said, does he have Venmo? So just jumping right into it for the sake of time, because I could talk about that for a while. And this is kind of just a question for all the panelists, just to kind of start us off. I think that when we do these panels, we always go hard into the statistics and everything. But what we want to know is, you know, for us, to me, to get to a single payer ideology or thought process, if you're American, if you haven't lived in another country, it typically something has happened. So I want to know, what healthcare injustice did you experience that made you believe that single payer is the more just healthcare system than the for-profit system that exists today? So, you know, I mean, if you want, we can, I really don't, you know, it's so hard to do these things via Zoom. You know, it's kind of like, how do you pick someone? But, you know, Dr. Song, you're spotlighted right now, so I'm going to make it easy for Dennis. So if you want to go ahead and start with that question, that'd be great.
Well, first of all, thanks everyone for allowing us to be here, and what an amazing group of people and family. It's so great to be with the whole Bernie family once again. So I've been a radiation oncologist for about 25 years. And probably about 3 or 4 years into my practice, I started to see too many of my own patients going bankrupt or being denied the care that they needed, particularly as they started to become more progressive with their cancer. And I started to do some research into what was broken about our healthcare system, and soon realized that it's really the multiple for-profit entities that really control our healthcare system. So seeing firsthand the toll that was taking on patients who had worked their whole lives, done the right thing, had insurance, that were going bankrupt was really the last straw for me. And so for the last probably 20 years, I've been very much trying to push for this Medicare for all system that our politicians still refuse to give us.
Awesome, thank you. Maria, do you want to answer that? I know you're going to answer it with some fire, so just
Southeast LA is the epicenter of the resurgence of the coronavirus, and we have the highest rates of uninsured children and the second highest rates of uninsured adults in LA County. We also have high levels of leukemia and different types of cancers, as well as respiratory issues here. So the necessity for single payer healthcare is as pronounced as it is anywhere that it is in here in Southeast LA. For me, I talk to people all the time here, and I hear stories of people having to go to the emergency and having to pay $120 in urgent care, and now they can't pay their rent. So it's a very, very real issue. Just the city of Southgate, 37% of the people in Southgate don't have any type of health care, nothing. And the people in Southgate and in Southeast live 10 years less than people in Beverly Hills, simply because we're surrounded by oil wells, refineries, and all kinds of companies that release carcinogens into our environment, our air, water, our bodies. So I was specifically asked to run against the speaker after he shelved SB 562, and there was the recall that was done. And the common question was being asked, who's going to run against him? And we, you don't do a recall to put in a candidate, you do a recall to get rid of who's there. And actually that wasn't even something that was even thought of. And apparently there was a meeting when they asked me to run, and I honestly would have never imagined it. But the need for healthcare is especially now during a pandemic, there is absolutely no excuse for the assembly not to work on that bill. The fact is the work has been done. We do not need $300 billion to get this done. That's just false. Gavin Newsom got the support of the Nurses Association. I have no idea why, because he couldn't even say SB 562 for most of his campaign. He doesn't have the what it takes to get it done, to be perfectly honest. And I have no faith in him or his commission and what they're doing. We need to get people elected who are going to fight for this and champion this bill and get it passed. And if I have to go to district in this state to talk to people that are healthcare advocates to fight for this, I would do that. This is absolutely necessary. There's absolutely no excuse. If Gavin Newsom hasn't done the work and done his homework to know how much money we need and what it takes to get this done, then he's just actually blowing smoke up our ass. Sorry for the language. He's just wasting time, resources, and wasting our energy. We need to talk to people that are going to get it done, and he's not that person.
And that's why, yes, sorry.
We need to force the 10.
And that's what I knew you were going to bring. You were going to speak it like it is. And that's what this panel is. So, I mean, I encourage you panelists to speak truth to power. You know that the people who are watching these panels, if it was the establishment that decided to check in on us, great. I want them to, but this is basically friends on friends here. So they know that we're going to speak truth to power. So don't feel that you need to hold back to be politically correct. Just be honest is my thing. So I'll move the same question along to Baba Akili.
Thank you. And I want to make a quick correction. That article that you read, that I sent you, was from 1992, and there was a town hall in Little Rock, Arkansas, right after Clinton got elected, and we brought together people from around the country to lift up single payer, and we had this brief meeting with him, and we gave him our health security card, and so that was. That was an effort at trying to get that administration to look at single payer as a viable, necessary option. And the way I came to single payer was my daughter broke her leg, at school. She was playing, and I didn't have healthcare coverage. And so we went to the doctor, and they put a leg in the cast, and they did all that, but I couldn't, when we went back to get it off, I couldn't pay. And so we literally had to sneak out. And my children were quite embarrassed and upset. And why did we do this, Daddy? Because we literally had to sneak out because I couldn't pay. It was embarrassing, it was hurtful. And I thought there had to be a better way, that this seriously does not make any sense, that we would tie healthcare to a person's job. And even if they had a job, if they didn't have healthcare, then it still didn't matter. And so that personal experience triggered the thinking in me there's got to be a better way. And what is that better way? And as I was doing work, much of the work I've been doing for many years, it led me to Neighbor to Neighbor. Neighbor to Neighbor was transitioning from our work around Central America and support of the changes in Central America and moving to the National Health Security Plan. And that's kind of what helped me get involved in it. We did a lot in the early 90s, leading up to putting an initiative on the ballot in 1994 that would have made California a single payer state. So one, it was a personal experience, and two, it was my continued organizational work that I had been doing around the issue of racial and social justice.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, up next, Maureen.
There. Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for being on this call. early in the 1970s, I first became aware when I was a graduate student and I was working as a research associate at UCLA with a program called the Community Liaison and Evaluation of Programs. And I was interviewing people who had been patients in a variety of UCLA-sponsored research done by, psychiatry residents and fellows. And this was, it was a program to assess what happened to people afterward. And I encountered people weeping on the phone because they were no longer needed for the research. They could no longer access mental health care. And that to me was a real shock. And I just felt awful checking in with these people and finding out that there were no resources for them. Then later, I left graduate school and I became an RN. And the shock continued when I was a bedside hospital RN, and I realized that in the 1970s, dying seniors were getting treatments that they didn't need because it made money for the hospital. They were called rent cases. And at the same time, young people with families and futures were denied care. We had one young man who actually worked for the hospital in accounting. He was in his, I would say, late 20s, early 30s, and his insurance ran out. So he was booted out of the hospital. And in order to, he was in an automobile accident, so he was in pretty bad shape. He had young kids. In those days, one had to lose everything to be admitted to the county system to get care. And the next blow was in the 1990s when I was a public health clinic nurse for the county of LA. And I witnessed the absolute decimation of public health, closing the clinics, stripping away of services for the poorest people in the county, while LA County Hospital was doing a remodel. And for a hospital that had people lined up in gurneys in the hallways and people lined up on the sidewalk waiting to get in for the clinic care, that remodel removed about a third of the beds in the hospital rather than adding them. Mm-hmm. In 2000, my retired longtime teacher, father, was a high school teacher, on Kaiser, he did not get the care that he needed to recover from his stroke as a Kaiser patient. 10 years later, my sister, who taught in a federal program in Oakland for the disabled adults that was dismantled under Obama, then she lost her job and her health care. She ended up with the unaffordable COBRA. And she asked me, wow, all that money I put into the system and never used, now that, and she's a single mother of two, now that I needed care, where's all that money I paid into the system for decades? So, and it's just been more of the same. So I got very, very involved about 20 years ago. And the message all along the way was first that poor people don't matter. And the second thing that happened is that over time, that has devolved into no people matter. So Martin Luther King said it best. He said an injury to one is an injury to all. And sooner or later, one becomes all. And that's where we are now. Thank you.
There we are, absolutely. So I'll move it on to Kalkidan, and I want to tell you, it's actually great. I mean, not having Patrice was one thing, but then when, you guys told me Kalkidan was going to join, I looked at it and I said, you know what? Hell yeah, Gen Z represent, because Gen Z tends to make millennials look bad. Everyone wants to look at the millennial like we're the badassery. We're kind of not. We are and we're not. Gen Z has kind of like shown us up quite a few times, between the TikToking Trump's rally to, the Parkland, like the Parkland kids, mobilizing, to now we have, a new college, just barely entering college, already on this fight for single payer. And I'm 32 years old and just now really getting on board. So I feel bad. I look bad, but I'm so happy to have you on this panel. So the same question, what is it that brought you at this like very young age where you should be TikToking and at the beach or something right now? Please don't be at the beach. What is it that has you right here?
Thank you. And yes, Generation Z is absolutely the best generation. That international experience that you were talking about when you first asked the question is kind of something that I would bring. Because I came here when I was 7 years old and I lived in Ethiopia. And even though I was really young, I remember my time there incredibly, like vividly, especially when it came to the realities of poverty. So just for a reference, Ethiopia is among the top 10 poorest countries in the world. So wherever you live, no matter how privileged you were, no matter how many cars you owned, etc., you open your front door every morning and there will be a family at your doorstep, and there'll be dozens more on your block. So it's not something that you could ignore. Apathy is really not an option. And then you compare that to America, where, you know, if you live in Santa Monica, you have to drive, what, an hour or two to see Skid Row, and that's America's version of poverty. And then, you know, I'm watching these political debates and watching Bernie Sanders up there, and then I see people like, you know, Pete Buttigieg, who are Democratic and progressive, having the audacity to get on a stage and talk about access to healthcare, which is pretty much code for, you know, you can go to the hospital, we'll treat you if you're sick, but then you'll lose your house afterwards, or, you know, you'll lose your livelihood, and now you'll file bankruptcy. And then they just, you know, they package it in a BS line like Medicare for all who want it. No, single payer and single payer only. All lives have the same value, and no one person should suffer needlessly because they're not rich enough to live. So that's on a moral basis, and unfortunately, a lot of our leaders have sold out their morals to the highest bidder. But even if we focus on the financial aspect, the very existence of a private sector, when we talk about healthcare, it undermines and threatens the financial foundation of the public system. So no, I'm not, you know, settling for a public option in the wealthiest nation in the world, and especially not in the state with the 5th largest GDP. That level of immorality and apathy is incomprehensible to me. So that's why I'm here.
Wow. And once again, millennial, we just got shown up, like, whoa. So very, that's how I know change is coming, because this is coming after I am. I'm opening the door for her. And, you know, this is what we need to do. So we're running over time. So the questions I may, you know, hop around on these questions really quick, and we probably won't get through all of them. But really quick, Maureen, I want to address this to you because as it was mentioned, you know, Senator Sanders' platform and his message was misconstrued so much in the media. And a lot of people are confused by what single payer really means. So could you provide a simple explanation for what single payer means and how it worked in California? I know that that's not a simple way, it's not simple to explain, but let's say Kalkidan needed to put it on a meme so she could spread it to her friends. What would you say single payer in California is?
Maureen.
Yeah, I was like, I think you're on mute. Oh, the great Zoom, you're on mute.
Waste a lot of time unmuting.
All right.
Anyway, yeah, single payer is a unified financing system that will provide universal care, that is care to everyone, and all means all, for the same exact quality of care. We would not, it does not mean tiered care, which is public option and Medicaid and Medicare, because that is a bigoted supremacist ideology of privilege, where some lives are worth more than others. So single payer is a universal system. It covers everyone for all medically necessary care. You have free choice of a provider. There is no network, no out-of-pocket costs, no copays, no deductibles, no premiums. The state becomes the insurer. They are the insurance company, but the care is actually privately delivered in that the hospitals and the doctors are not employees of the state. It totally eliminates that cost sharing. It saves hundreds of billions of dollars so that we can provide the same quality of care to all. It also has a component in it for equalizing, more than equalizing, giving areas that need more facilities, that need clinics, that need hospitals, because we've seen these healthcare deserts now being stripped out of all their facilities by a for-profit system. It would be the investment of our tax dollars into these areas to provide the same, exact same care for everyone. And when people say to me, well, I don't know, how can we afford it, this and that? And I say, you know, when the unhoused person, when the undocumented, when the gardener and the housekeeper of these commissioners and of the politicians and of the CEOs and of the governor all have the same care. You can't buy any other care. We all have the same care. Two things are going to happen. There will be plenty of money for it, and the quality will be high. So that's why we say no tiered system, no, oh, you know, you can have a separate, you can buy something different. No, everybody in, nobody out. All lives are equal.
Thank you so much, Maureen.
Universal healthcare.
Thank you so much, Maureen. I will be the first one that said that this public option idea is nothing but an economic separate but equal, and we know separate but equal does not work.
No.
So, you know, like I said, I'm going to move these questions along, but these last two questions I'm going to ask, you know, I'm going to definitely want to get the panel on, and if we could just, you know, keep it brief, but I definitely want to hear, so how, in your view, would single payer serve low income or underserved communities compared to the current system? For example, how would a single payer system improve the quality of life for the Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Pacific Islander communities who suffered disproportionately from COVID? And right now, you know, I want to bring up, you know, I know Baba Akili, thank you for being on this panel, because I know you recently, you know, lost someone to COVID. And it's really terrible because we know that we didn't have to. And so I want to start off with this question to you. I know that you're still feeling, you know, the loss of your family member, but I mean, how do you think, can this have helped this current situation in our community, most importantly?
Thank you. And yes, I lost my cousin Monday. She lives in Florida. And because DeSantis is a replica of Trump, he hasn't taken responsibility and has engaged in the same inept, stupid, and incompetent approach to handling this pandemic. And I blame, quite frankly, Trump. I blame the governor of Florida for my cousin's death. You know, and so, but that's part of a system in America. And there are 4 conditions that Black people have to deal with in the US: white supremacy, institutional racism, individual bigotry, and mass denial. And it's the last one that allowed the other 3 to exist. And quite frankly, what single payer does and Medicare for All does is, it's very simply, it's one system, one approach, one payer. And while that will scare Black people, because we know when we hear in America for all, it don't mean us. Like justice for all and all the rest of it. We know it don't mean us. As a matter of fact, we chuckle when we hear it, because this country has a history of denial and deprivation to Black people. And so we have to make the difference is that we are going to have to fight for it. We are going to have to demand it, and we are going to have to be in the center of making it work. That's the only way it will be of meaningful impact to Black folks. And that's why I say, you know, we have got to add Black voices. We've got to add Latino voices. We've got to add Indigenous voices, because if we don't, even if we get single payer, even if we get Medicare for all, and Medicare works right now, but it still has, and because of institutional racism, and still an impact on Black folks. And so part of it is we are going to have to fight for it. Like, we're going to have to struggle, and we're going to have to demand. We cannot allow Medicare for all to come into being and not be a part of it. We cannot see it happening without being the center of it, because we know what will happen. We know, and we've got a history of it. And so part of the reason why I, in the 90s, was working for it, because I knew, and I had a personal experience, but I also knew that we would be left out. And if you couple that with the current health discrimination that exists, the current health disparity that exists, unless we fight for, struggle for, and demand inclusion and participation, full participation, it will have minimal impact in our community. And that's why I'm on this call. That's why I have been a fighter for single payer for a long time, because we need that voice. We need that position. We need that struggle, and it will be uncomfortable because we will have to challenge white folks. We're gonna have to challenge the assumption that somehow or another Black folks can take more pain than other people. We're gonna have to challenge the assumption that just because we have sickle cell anemia and are in pain, that we can handle it. No, we are going to have to fight, struggle, and demand.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you and I and Kalkidan too, we're about to hit it hard coming in the upcoming future, especially when we get to have in-person meetings again. So I'm going to move this question along to Dr. Song. You know, the Asian American, specifically Pacific Islander, you know, surprisingly, the number affected by COVID here in California, the numbers were staggering. You know, it was the Black community and then the brown community and then AAPI, and it was just like, you know, the Pacific Islander, I mean, granted, I know that it's a little bit different demographic, but what are your thoughts on how, if a single payer system could also, how can that affect in the, you know, the AAPI and the Asian American community?
So first of all, I just want to give a shout out to the shirt that I'm wearing for Shirley Chisholm, because as we
love Shirley.
We'll soon elect Kamala Harris as vice president, I want people to realize that, you know, the original member of the squad was Shirley Chisholm, and she really touted healthcare and the problems that existed with healthcare. She said that the problem was we viewed it too much as a privilege available only to those who could afford it, and that was the real reason our healthcare system was in such a scandalous state. And she said this in 1972. This is more
I didn't see her in the room, and I was just worried because it could, you know, I think it's supposed to be
Mary, can you mute yourself?
Oh, okay. So just the reason I want to point that out is this healthcare as a privilege still exists, and it exists across all communities. Primarily, communities of color have been disadvantaged because truly it has been a privilege, not a right for communities of color. But within the Asian American community, we are not all this model minority that we've been led to been characterized as. There's a fair number of Asian Americans who are uninsured here in the state of California. There are lots of Asian Americans who are living in poverty. So the members of that community face the same challenges as others. It's just not been as dramatic. The thing I really want to stress about healthcare, because I know we don't have much time, but I just want to get this point across, is so 4 years ago, I got in a lot of trouble because I used a very derogatory term to refer to members of Congress who were beholden to the private insurance industry and the pharmaceutical industry. And unfortunately, there was more outrage against the term rather than the number of people that are left behind by our current healthcare system. And yet this is so true, and why we still cannot get the things that we deserve, that we have too many Democrats that are beholden to corporations and not to the will of the constituency of our individuals. And I think it's very important to get a few things across. You heard Amy Klobuchar during the debate saying that 100 million people were going to lose their employer-sponsored health care if we went to Bernie's Medicare for All plan. Well, we've now had 27 million people lose their employer-sponsored health care. You had Joe Biden, who obviously we have to get elected in this time of an existential threat, say that Medicare for All, the deaths that we saw in Italy and in Europe were an indictment of how Medicare for All didn't work. Well, you know, let's look at the facts, and we need to make sure that we support getting Trump out of office, but we need to fight back hard on the lies that are being perpetuated by our own party. And I think it's very, very important. So when we look at educating and continuing to everyone across the board, teaching them about the facts of healthcare, I think you'll see that support for Medicare for All, which already is 87% among Democrats, continue to climb, and 69% among independents. But we need to make these points. We need to get it across now. And sorry to deviate, but I just really wanted us to be mindful at the same time. Do not give up. To continue to tell the truth about why this is the system we need, and now more than ever.
Awesome, thank you. And lastly, Maria, I know you've already kind of spoken to this, but is there anything you wanted to add to this question, to you know, from the Latinx community? Is Maria? Wait, I lost her on my
I'm
little.
here.
Okay, sorry, I lost you on my little thing.
So I'm just more focused of getting it done at the state level, because if we could pass it in California, then it'll go across the country. I'm of the belief that we have a better chance of getting it passed under Trump than Biden, simply because Biden has already stated that he would not sign it. So I'm not going to engage in the presidential election, because I personally will not be supporting the Democratic ticket, and I won't be supporting Donald Trump. So this is a problem. This capitalist system is the problem, and the people, the political parties are irrelevant. These are all capitalists that we're talking about. And the problem is, the disease is capitalism, and that's what's costing lives. And they're going to put their profits over our lives, and that's the bottom line here. They do not care about the fact that you have people who they're not going to go get tested, because even if they are sick, they don't have the resources to get the treatment they need. You could go from any issue, especially in the Latino community, where people will avoid going to the doctor simply because of the expense of it. That's going to be, they're going to have to make a decision between paying their electric bill, feeding their family, or going to visit the doctor. This is an extremely urgent issue that should be at the forefront of every political campaign, at the forefront of every meeting, at the forefront of everybody's circle, because this is costing lives every day. Not just the fact that we have COVID, the fact that I live in a city, in an area that people are dying because they, just for living here, their lives are cut short 10 years. The fact that we have so many children here with so many medical issues just from being contaminated, young people with cancer, which is usually more aggressive than when you're older. We have to get this passed, and we cannot depend on the Democratic Party. That is not my party. I'm running as a Democrat. They do not represent me or my community. They represent the interest of their donors and their own agenda. And that agenda does not include getting health care for everyone, because if that were the case, we would have had that shit a long time ago. Let's just be honest. Democrats are a bigger threat to the progressive movement than the Republican Party. So we need to stop pretending like Democrats represent us, they're about us, they care about us. This is capitalism, plain and simple. And we need to start looking outside of the box and stop depending on that party to carry us and to represent us. We need to start fighting outside of that party as much as within it. I'm in the LA County Central County Committee, the largest and most powerful Central County Committee in the country. I cannot even express to you how corrupt that organization is.
So I don't mean
to focus on healthcare, and we need to get the people elected that are going to fight for that. Whether they're Democrats or it's irrelevant. We need to get people that are going to fight for that issue.
Exactly. And I agree, it is very disappointing to see how many people come to our communities for votes. And when we say all we want is someone to give a damn, all they say is okay, and then turn around and write the most dangerous legislation to our communities. But I know I'm running over time, but I really want to get this last question out. So Chang Sim, bear with me because it's so important. And it's just such a powerful question. And it's something that I don't think that we think about too much and especially in the Black and Brown community. So Baba, Akili, I'm going to bring this, I didn't forget about you, Kalkidan, but I'm going to come back. But I want to bring this question to you primarily. It's how can we address the mistrust between our historically marginalized communities and the healthcare system, especially the Black community, where we have been the victims of healthcare racism, experimentation, and anything else. How can we convince our community to trust this when that trust has been broken for decades?
Well, first of all, we can't.
Well, that's simply put.
Yeah, just say that. Let me just start with that. What we are going to need is credible message and credible messengers. And then we're going to need relationships. We don't have any right now. And one of the things I learned from the 1994 effort, when we put the initiative on the ballot, there was this assumption that Black people would go along because if white people supported it, as if we don't think, and I had many struggles within the campaign with that. And so until 1, we get the relationships. 2, we get the credibility. And 3, we have credible presenters. We probably won't, quite frankly. One of the things that we are working with Black Lives Matter is that we are a Black-led, Black-centered, Black-directed organization with allied support. And this is not that. And so the likelihood, you will get general support. That is, okay, it sounds good, but specific and direct engagement and support is going to depend on those 3 things. First, you got to have the relationships. Second, you got to have a credible message. Third, you got to have credible messengers. And until we get there, and let me just say this. Look at him. Here are the things that we have to deal with in our community. I just got off a call around buying the Crenshaw Mall and stopping gentrification. So we have police violence, we have gentrification, we have the wealth gap, we have mass incarceration. And so if you look at how we spend our time, it's going to be related to one of those, and then there are others, but it's going to be related to those. And if you want us to be invested in and participating in and supporting healthcare, then you're going to have to make the same level of effort that others have made. And the relationships have to be built on 3 things: mutual respect, mutual support, and mutual benefit. The last one is not always the case, and usually the second one is not there. You may respect us, but when we really need the support for our issues around gentrification and police violence and mass incarceration, and you ain't there, then we'll notice that. Or the same thing. Are we going to benefit? Are Black folks going to benefit from this? Mutual respect, support, and benefit. So those are the 3 things you're going to need if you're going to build a relationship. And then secondly, you got to have a credible message. And just saying for all is not it. And then finally, you got to have credible messengers.
Yes, thank you so much. What you said is so true, and that's something I think in the Bernie campaign, I definitely brought to that campaign and said, that's why I said, we set up in Leimert Park early, because I said we have to gain the trust of the community. It's not just going to be oh, well, he's cool. I said we got to gain trust here, and we are always
But let me stop you there. It ain't trust. It's we trust you. Because listen, if you Black in America, you know how to relate to white people. We get taught that at an early age. It's white people you got to train to deal with us. So we trust you. It's respect that we're looking for. We don't care about your trust. We want respect, support, and benefit. So even if we know you, and one of the things we struggle with, particularly with BLMLA, is that many people talk about the police. We got to build trust. No, we don't need to trust the police. We don't trust them, but we need respect. And so we need those 3 things: respect, trust, and benefit. We need credible messengers. We need credible messages, and we need relationships.
Thank you so much. That was just, I hope that if we do have some Democratic Party leaders on here, please, I hope you heard that. And then, so I got to wrap this up, and I'm sorry I couldn't get to everybody on this question, but I do want to end it with Kalkidan, because I do believe what she's bringing is the future, and we have to start opening the doors right now. We can't just say millennials and leave it at me. I want to hear, Kalkidan, how do you think that even in your generation, you already feel this distrust and this issue in healthcare? How do you think we can address this in our generations, the millennial and Gen Z, moving forward?
Yeah. So first off, Akili just kind of said everything that I was thinking. So just claps for that. I think the younger generation is, they're joining organizations that they feel put, their beliefs at the forefront. And so, Black Lives Matter, yes, believes in single payer, but it's focused on police brutality. It's focused on economic security, right? And for healthcare, for us to garner everyone's support, we need to join forces and support other groups with other initiatives. I think that is like the key, is we can't just keep, partnering up with other healthcare organizations. As great as it is, we're not getting to the community of the other organizations. So while, you know, Akili might support single healthcare and he's representing Black Lives Matter LA, we're not getting to the you know, the supporters of Black Lives Matter LA. We're not getting to those people at that surface level, below that surface level, excuse me. So, you know, joining organizations and fighting for other causes while putting healthcare at our forefront, and then allowing other organizations to also, you know, have a say, like you're doing with me and having a Black woman on here. This is exactly, I feel like, the road that we need to take, and we're taking the first steps by having diverse voices right now.
Yes. So I just want to, you know, end with that, because I believe that it just needs to be heard. We have a not just racial diversity on this panel, we have an age diversity on this panel, and that is, like, together very important. So now I'm going to turn this over to Erica. I do have more questions, but I told Chang Sim we could have an up all nighter about single payer, literally from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. We could have a slumber party where we just pontificate single payer healthcare. And I would invite Gavin and everybody else, the Assembly and the Senate, to join our up all night about single payer. But I'm gonna turn it over to Erica, where we're gonna focus more on the how we're gonna get this done.
Thank you. That was incredible, Gina and panelists. Chang Sim, what time do you want me to go till? Because I know we're behind. If you want to text me, I will try to accommodate. Gina, I just want to say that in the chat, they found the 330 billion. It's right here in the chat. So somebody take a photo and send it to Governor Newsom.
Venmo him.
Figured it out. I love you all on the chat. Thank you for everything. So that's the 330 billion right there. And along those lines, I just want to say that, you know, that often comes up, but nobody talks about all the money we're spending now for only, you know, a small portion of people to get health care. And that if we would have had SB 562 implemented, at the end of this year, the state of California would have saved $111 billion. So just wanted to bring that up. So, okay, I don't have a lot of time, so I'm gonna just kind of skip around here, but I'll start with you, Kalkidan. What do you think are the first steps in getting single payer Medicare for all in California? And because we are running behind, if everybody could maybe keep their answers right to the point.
I'm pretty optimistic, and I believe in, like, community organizing. So I say target and run campaigns against every single Democratic supermajority that we have on there who's not supporting Medicare for all. You know, like, statistically, 80% of Californians support Medicare for all. So logically, there's no reason why it hasn't passed yet. So, you know, like, what do you do with bad employees? You fire them. So I think in the same way, if we can get some progressives, you know, run in these incumbent seats and flip them, scare them, pressure them. Maria Estrada is in here. I absolutely love this woman. It's an honor to be with you, ma'am. And the way that she is, you know, scaring the living crap out of Assembly Member Rendon, like, exactly what she's doing, I say give them hell, and give them a run for their money. So run campaigns against them.
Thank you. And Maria, you just got ma'amed. I'm gonna leave that alone.
I'm a grandma, honey. I'm okay with it. I didn't grow this out. I earned these gray hairs, man.
And yeah, so here at Healthcare for All Los Angeles, because we have limited resources, limited time, we have Maria Estrada is our priority candidate. If you think of this as a military strategy and you have limited resources, what hill do you need to take? We want to take the Rendon hill. We want to boot him out. We think that would send quite the message to the governor and the rest of the legislature. As Kalkidan pointed out, is a super majority of Democrats, and they are the ones who have blocked SB 562 single payer here in the state. So please check out Maria Estrada's campaign. Dr. Song, what do you think is the first step in getting single payer Medicare for all here in California?
A fractured movement after 562. Some of the different groups of the coalition kind of broke apart, and it would be really nice for all of us to come back together in a way that put all of our energy focused on trying to get a bill passed. Secondly, we need a bill to organize around. So we need a legislator that's bold enough and willing to buck the party establishment to actually try to get a bill introduced, which we haven't been able to find anyone in the last 2 years. Which is really telling in and of itself. So I think those are the most immediate things. If we could find one bold legislator that was willing to say, I'm willing to put a bill on the table, it could really start to re-energize the entire coalition, get us all back together to really start to be much more forceful. And I think you would have a lot more people that have been personally affected by the COVID situation. Those who have lost their jobs, those who have lost family members strictly because of decreased access to care. And I think so the urgency is there, but the fact that not one legislator is willing to step forward and introduce a bill is really pretty awful. I also think it's time that we start to primary more and more corporate Dems in our state as well as nationally, which is what you saw, right? You saw Cori Bush win, and you saw Jamal Bowman win, and you see a lot of real progressives that people are resonating to that message. They're tired of the status quo. And so I think we need to do all of those things. But the first thing is we just need to find some legislator that, and many of us know quite a few of them, but the fact that we can't even get one of these people to step forward and put a bill together is crap.
Well, thank you, Dr. Song. Maureen, what do you think is the first step in getting single payer Medicare for all here in California?
Well, I agree both with Kalkidan and Paul, of course, that we need to organize. We also need a bill. There is a bill that is being drafted for California with a very small group of people, I believe, and it is a blending of SB 562, the state bill, and Jayapal's bill 1384. So we need a bill, as Dr. Song said, to organize around. We also have to pass a law expressing policy that is starts the process, that puts a trust fund together that says that yes, we are going forward. We need to obtain waivers. There's a controversy about that, but you know, there are mixed opinions on how easy or difficult it is to get a waiver and also to deal with the ERISA, but there are mixed opinions on it. Nothing is set in stone. People say, well, we may have to go to court. Well, what else is new? The people are always going to court to defend our rights, and Medicare for all is a human right. So that's what we need to do, but we need to organize. We need to get this bill, as Dr. Song said, we have got to get someone in the assembly. Los Angeles Healthcare for All has endorsed 7 local candidates, 2 for Congress, 1 for state Senate, which is Liz Castillo, and 4 for the state assembly. And we believe those candidates are Medicare for all. They are grassroots Medicare for all supporters. They have shown that. We haven't seen any demonstration from anyone in office that they are inclined to support it. So we need new people in office.
Thank you. Okay, this next question is for you, Baba Akili. We are in the middle of the greatest movement in history, led by Black Lives Matter, a movement to end white supremacy and state-sanctioned violence against the Black communities. And the current healthcare system that we have now is one of apartheid. It is discriminatory. It basically gives high quality care to wealthy and often white population, and it gives inconsistent and subpar care to people who don't have money, to poor people, to disproportionately in Black communities, Latinx communities, indigenous communities. And so I'm wondering how I see our healthcare system as a form of, you know, systemic violence. And how can that be communicated and have a movement built around that, like Black Lives Matter has done, for a movement to move us from, as Patrice Cullors says, from an economy of punishment to an economy of care, in which single payer would be a part of that.
Yeah, that's a big order and a tall question. And I want to try to combine my response to that and to the other. First of all, you know, the fact that you mentioned healthcare apartheid, that's a way to sum it up, a good way to sum it up, as a matter of fact. Part of what we are going to need is education and agitation. We know about this, but we don't agitate people about it. And so we point out a bad thing, but we don't point out the alternative, or we haven't done that yet. So part of it, both as an organizer, I mean, there are three elements that organizers have. We have challenge, and if you challenge the status quo, you are going to wind up in a confrontation. If you hold to that challenge, you're going to be confronting power. And if you hold to that confrontation and challenge, you're going to wind up having to disrupt. We haven't got to the disruption phase yet. We haven't even got to the challenge phase or confrontation phase. So how do we get there? Part of it is we have to do engagements and actions. We have to do some mobilizing beyond where we are. And we need a target. One of the things, if you look at all changes that have been made in the US, if you look at women getting the right to vote, it didn't center around getting legislation first. It centered around 1848 to 1920 and all of the mobilizations that went on to make that happen. If you look at the civil rights movement or the labor movement, it didn't center around legislation. Legislation came next. It was the demand of the people that made the legislation real. So we have got to get people to demand universal health care. And we have to get people to demand healthcare as a human right. Part of the struggle for many folks is that we've tied it so tightly to people's jobs, and I'm comfortable, I got some, you know what I mean? But then I lose my job and then I don't have it. And we have got to be the people who make that argument that this doesn't work, but it's got to be centered around a set of demands. Secondly, what does the mobilization and engagement look like? We need a target. And in this case, we got the insurance companies, which most of us do not like. Most of us don't like we like the fact that we got healthcare. We don't like the fact that we got to argue with our insurance company about paying for it or paying, using the process. So we need targets. We need agitation. We need mobilizations, and we need resources. I'm surprised that there isn't at least 4 healthcare for all GoFundMes right now, at least 4, raising money all across the state, all across the country. I like the idea of challenging, moderate Democrats, and but we got to have resources to do that. One way that you can show levels of support is the GoFundMes. I mean, I'm surprised that we ain't got 4 or 6 or 10 of those GoFundMes. And I bet you people would contribute, particularly if we said that we are fighting for single payer in California. We're fighting for, so we need resources. We need education and agitation. We need engagement and actions. And we need at least a single or some targets. I'm saying the insurance companies because they are the ones that are standing in the way, quite frankly. And they give a lot of money. I mean, they are the ones that force Rendon to shove the bill, quite frankly. And because we don't have a target that's connected to a series of demands, there's nothing to move people to. And so I would ask us to look at, 1, engagement and actions. So how do we engage people, and what kind of actions can we, can we be a part of, and mobilizations. 2, a target. 3, a set of critical demands that really speak to people's interest, and then finally, resource development.
Thank you. You're lighting up the chat here. I'm seeing lots of yeses and people adding on to that. So thank you so much. Maria Estrada. I think are you still there, Maria?
I'm here.
Okay, so just how would you answer this, but address to the Latinx community?
Well, I need to get myself elected to get this done. But I'll be honest with you, just even any of the measures that you just mentioned today, people in communities like mine, Black and brown people, never know about any of the measures. We, because we're politically engaged, know every measure, and we'll be talking about this measure or that measure, but when you go into these areas, they don't get that information. And what happens is big moneyed interests will pay someone like Villaraigosa to go on the radio and convince Latinos to vote the wrong way, because we don't have the resources or the people that are not with the special moneyed interest in our communities, giving our people the information. I've been asked to speak at so many different events to tell people how to vote, simply because they don't know what's out there. So when they get to the polls, they're guessing. They're literally guessing. So I am actually putting like a little flyer together. So when I canvass, I'm going to give them what I'm going to vote for, so that they vote how I think is the best way. But we've been doing that since the previous election in 2018, where we put the bills that we were supporting in bright colors, and a check for yes, a check for no, to get that information out there. Getting the people who need it most engaged and the information they need is crucial, and that never seems to happen. So to me, that's part of my responsibility, is getting them that information on these measures, so that they do know how to vote. And so when they do find out, I mean, one of the simplest things I tell people in my community is, I don't send out mailers. I don't have that kind of resources to send out tens of thousands of mailers. Just a stamp, if I sent out 10,000 mailers in my district of over 200,000 voters, you know, the stamps alone would kill me. So the reality is that we got to use the resources we have to get that information out there. Otherwise, none of these measures that you guys all just brought up are going to get passed. That's the reality we're dealing with. So as much as we discuss it, unless it's in our communities, the Black and brown communities, South Central, Southeast, all over this state, they're not going to pass. That's only the people who are politically engaged, who are for the establishment, which is the Democratic Party, is why stuff gets passed here. The fact that the repeal on the gas tax did not pass, that tax hurts the working class people. That tax was a Republican bill. I supported that bill. And I was attacked for supporting a Republican bill. I don't care who writes the bill. I care how it affects people in my community. And that's what we got to be really cognizant of, because a lot of times we get so caught up in it's a Democratic thing or it's a Republican thing, but it's not a people thing. And that's what we forget. And that's what we need to focus on. And that's why we need to get this information to the very people that need it the most. They need to be made aware. And that is the Black and brown community. Anyway,
thank you so much, Maria. I really appreciate that. I've got 3 minutes to wrap up. I have 2 questions. I don't know if I'll get to both of them, but on your note and what Akili said, you know, a great opportunity then, since we are out moneyed, is I do want to encourage people to sign up and volunteer for Maria's campaign and canvass. And while you're canvassing for Maria, it's an opportunity to educate people on single payer. So thank you so much for that. Maureen, I'm going to ask you this question. This was touched upon earlier by Gina, and I've even heard people in the single payer movement kind of, can you just explain? So there are organizations that claim to be in support of single payer, but then they make the case for using incremental approaches, tinkering around the edges, such as expanding Medicaid or having a public option. And what I was going to say earlier is I've even seen people in the single payer movement use single payer and public option interchangeably, which you can't do that. They're not the same. So Maureen, quickly, could you take 1 minute to tell us why expanding Medicaid and a public option is not going to get us to single payer?
Very simply, we are in a state of an emergency and urgency, and we've been there for decades. People are dying every single day. Incrementalism says more people will die today, more tomorrow, more next week, more next month. More will go bankrupt, more communities will dissolve into impoverishment, and you know, it just continues a couple of things. It continues the cruel system that we have now that sacrifices people on the altar of profit. It's both Medicaid expansion, because Medicaid is run primarily by for-profit. The administration is done by for-profit insurance industry. They made $3 billion last year out of Medicaid. The only way you make money in healthcare when you're in an insurance industry is to deny people care. So my question is, why would we even consider a public option, which is apartheid and tiered care, and throws some people under the bus? It's bargain basement care for some and penthouse care for others. So why would we do that in order to promote further profiteering by the insurance industry? It makes absolutely no sense. And this is an opposition tactic. The insurance industry and the banks and the pharmaceutical and the hospitals, they're not going to come at us and say, oh, we're their insurance companies and we're against single payer. Oh no, they're going to come through these foundations with these wonderful names like, you know, Healthcare Foundation, and we care so much, and, you know, that do all these little tiny Band-Aid fixes. Those are not solutions. We need a solution. And with that solution comes an overall recognition of what it takes to keep people healthy. Health maintenance as well as medical treatment. But incrementalism, little, you know, Band-Aids, delays, saying, well, you know, not this year, maybe next year, maybe 10 years from now. There's a public option bill, public option suggestion out there now called the Roadmap to Golden State Care, and it requires 41 bits of legislation before it gets to the end. And at the end, it pretty much gives you 3 choices, and it's public option. But all along the way, the insurance industry is profiting out of the public treasury. The Affordable Care Act opened the public treasury to the insurance industry, to the hospital industry, to the pharmaceutical industry without, and by the way, the banks, the medical industry, the industry, real estate, they all make money in a system that mires people in public debt and causes people to lose everything in their lives that they've ever worked for. So the question is, why would we do that? No. National Health Service was done in 6 months in 1947 in a country that was completely devastated by war, bombed every day for 4 or 5 years, right? Everything was in a mess. People were in soup lines. The prime minister was against it. The doctors were against it. The parliament was, you know, the conservatives in the parliament were against it. They passed it anyway. And in 6 months, NHS was up and running. Medicare was done in 9 months, okay, with no computers. And a lot of people didn't have telephones. So, you know, this idea that it's impossible, I leave you with that Muhammad Ali quote, which I just love. He said, impossible is not a fact. Impossible is an opinion. Impossible means nothing. So this is not impossible. This is what we need. This is what we want. We can do it. Every other country in the world has done it. We can do it too.
Thank you so much, Maureen. I do have other questions, but I've been given it's time to move on to question and answer. So I'm going to turn it over to my co-host, Gina.
All righty, so here's the question and answer time. And we've been on, probably clocked all well over 1,000 Zoom hours. We all know how this is gonna go. So I'm gonna basically drop it real simple. You're gonna have 30 seconds to ask a question. And I'm really sorry to shorten this up, but we are running over time. So we're gonna go off of the participants, you raising your hand. I know some people have already raised their hand and have been had it raised for a while now. So we're gonna go down that list, but please ask a question. question, please don't pontificate. We are all activists here. I get it. And we are going to organize something soon where we can have open office hours for single payer, you know, so that it's just straight up questions and answers. It's not going to be a panel. Just, you know, I think that we don't get enough time to answer questions as much as we want to. It's just the fact that we just run out of time. So if you have raised your hand, or if you would like to ask a question, please feel free to raise your hand. I'm trying to see, I don't see, sorry, just give me 2 seconds here. And the first question I see, the first little hand I see is Nick Gaines. Do you still have a question, or was your, did you ask it in the chat already? Can we unmute Nick? Nicholas Gaines?
There we go.
All
Thanks,
right.
everybody.
Hey,
I do have a question I'd love to ask the panel. As I was kind of going back and forth in the chat, I think everybody knows that there's a limit to how many people we can get elected in the next cycle or even 2 cycles. So outside of the legislative process, what do you all think of using the new public bank that we've established under law, expropriating the San Francisco Mint, printing the $1 trillion coin, putting that into the new public bank, and using that to finance Medicare for All in California? Thank you. Really looking forward to your responses.
Maureen, do you want to take that? I know that you've done a lot of the financial breakdown on the Medicare for All in California.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'd like, could you repeat that question again? It was about the public bank, about making the state a public bank and putting that money in. That is a good idea. If we can get that, I know that there's a bill there. But you know, the money is already in the system. We already are paying 71% of our taxes in California already support the healthcare system. 71% of every healthcare dollar is publicly funded. We are already paying for a system. The money is already there. It's just 1/3 of it is wasted. It is stripped out for insurance and administrative waste of complex systems that we don't need. If we folded in Medicare, Medi-Cal, all of the systems we have now folded into one pocket, into one insurance trust fund, we really wouldn't need additional funds except to expand to more people. Basically, what we'd be doing is using a progressive tax system, possibly progressive taxes and sales tax or payroll taxes. That money's already being spent. We could spend much less and still give everyone in the state of California single payer universal health care, Medicare for all. So the money is actually there. It's already there.
Thank you, Maureen. Any of the panelists, Baba, Akili, you want to add to that really quick? I know we've got about 3 minutes left before they're going to kick us out.
Many years ago, I was in Ohio working on a national campaign, and I went out and made this, what I thought was a great presentation about why people needed to support this candidate. Afterwards, a friend of mine I bombed completely. You can't hardly believe how bad I bombed. It was like, oh Lord, what did I do? And brother who was with me at the time said, brother, what you was trying to do is feed these people sugar, and they kept telling you they got a toothache. Part of what we have to do is understand that people got toothaches and that our culture doesn't support what we are arguing for. I mean, help me understand, if you will, that people who smoked, even though they were chemically dependent, continued to smoke after you put that label on the package and said, this is dangerous for you. They continue to do it because culturally they believed it. What we are arguing is for a practical approach. That's why we have to have action. If we simply, listen, Jim Crow would still exist if we simply tried to argue why oppressing people based upon color was not the right thing to do. We challenged it. We confronted it. We disrupted the system. And so part of our arguments, I think, are good, but we are going to have to deal with the culture in America. The culture in America right now is being dictated to by industry. We're going to have to fight against that. You've heard me say this before. The industry is using the same playbook that the tobacco industry uses. and used effectively because the culture was on their side. The culture, we make decisions not based upon information, but based upon our beliefs. And our beliefs come from our culture. And our culture in America is one that if you got it, you deserve it. And if you ain't got it, you don't deserve it. You must be doing something wrong. And so that's the thing that we got to deal with. We got cogent arguments. We got great explanations. We got hell of a stacks of data and information, but it's I don't want to give up what I got, first of all, and I'm scared that what y'all talking about won't get me nothing anyway. So part of what I think we are going to have to do, and I would ask us not to plant all of our eggs in one tactic. That is the assumption that we got to get the right people elected. If that was the case, the shit would have happened already. If we could have gotten them, no movement that I've observed, and certainly none that I participated in, has ever relied on electoral politics to be its method of making substantive changes. We learned that when we lost mightily in 1994. We chose, and we thought at the time a good approach was to take our issue to the people. Well, the insurance companies, the hospital associations, and the doctors just overwhelmed us, and they breeded fear, and you see it all the time. We got a good idea, and then the industry comes in and frightens people. So planting all our eggs in electoral politics and depending on legislation may not be the best tactic. I'm not suggesting we give it up, but I am suggesting that we look at some other tactics. And one of the tactics I'm going to support and advance, because I've seen it work. I've seen it work for the suffrage movement. I've seen it work for the civil rights movement. I've seen it work for the labor movement. And I'm seeing it work for the Black Lives Matter movement now. 1, have a set of demands. 2, be willing to challenge, confront, and disrupt. And 3, educate people and mobilize them.
Amen. Thank you so much. So I'm going to try and squeeze in one more quick question, just because I hate the fact that we always have to cut off questions. So Paul Marchand, you had a question. Can it be really brief before we're already running into another panel's time? So if you have a quick question, can we unmute Paul?
Yeah, no, I think I'm unmuted now, aren't I?
Oh, perfect. Yes, you are. We can hear you.
I'm actually an emergency physician for 36 years, educated in France under a socialist system by a socialist university, and practiced somewhat in France while I was in school under a socialized medical system. So I'm experienced with this. And I will ask 2 questions. First of all, has there been any structure put in place to provide an alternative that we may want to move forward with, to say this is what we're going to replace this with? I mean, a solid structure that's printed out, it's something that we can hand out to people and something that we can show them this is how this is going to work. And second, I also want to point out that your chances of dying of COVID are greater if you're Native American than any other subgroup. Also, your chances of being killed by a policeman are greater if you're Native American than another subgroup. Is there any specific language to address Native American interests? Thank you.
Go ahead.
I'll go ahead and just take one part of this and then throw it to Maureen. The bill that's being addressed or being written up right now, the single payer bill, one of the main goals is that everybody sees themselves in this bill. So that if you're Native American, you see yourself in this bill. If you are Asian Pacific Islander, you see yourself. If you are transgender, you see yourself, and so on. So I just wanted to say that, but I do appreciate your questions and your comments, and whoever on the panel wants to answer the question, since I'm technically not a panelist.
Yeah, and one of the things I'd just like to say in regards to the Native Americans is we know that Navajo Nation's been devastated by some of the tribes, the Great Plains tribes that asked for masks from the government, got body bags instead. The Native Americans are always seen as the problem that whoever's in office has to deal with. But that being said, is anything that's ever written, it cannot affect the sovereignty of the tribes. And one of the things that happened was with the MMIW that bill that was written to, to bring resources for the murder of missing Indigenous women, actually took a lot of these bills are written in a manner that takes the sovereignty from the tribe. So it would have allowed the governor of the state of California power to appoint people. It would have allowed the speaker and the Senate pro tem to appoint people to oversee what's happening on on the tribal nations, and that can't happen. It has to be where they're included, but that they still have the ultimate say in what happens in the tribes. So that's just something that I know that I've dealt with when working with legislation and seeing how it's written, that they do take away the power from the tribes. And even though people think it's a good idea because they're going to get them resources or whatever, they don't have the control of the resources. They don't have the control of who's overseeing what's happening on these tribes. And that's just something that I know that we need to be very cautious of. That being said, is anything that's ever done, it should be inclusive of all people. The struggle of the Indigenous people that's been going on for hundreds of years is the struggle of the Black people, as the struggle of undocumented people and Indigenous people coming from South America. The rising up and the pushing up and the gains from the Black community helps all of us. Any gains in the Indigenous community helps all of us. So the sooner we understand that the people who are hurt most by white supremacy, this failed system, those who are most affected by this, if we could get them acclimated and put up and given the resources they need, everyone benefits from that. Everyone benefits. Had SB 562 passed, by the end of 2020, the state of California would have saved $111 billion, and we wouldn't be $54.3 billion in the hole, wondering what we're going to cut now. It is fiscally irresponsible and immoral not to pass a single healthcare bill. And the sooner that we put the pressure on every assembly person, every legislator to get this passed, the better off we'll be. We know that they're owned by the pharmaceutical industry, the healthcare industry, and we need to make it known that we will not allow it, and we will come after their seats. Everybody needs to be primary who doesn't support this.
And with that being said, that is the most powerful message right there that we can end this with. So I know that there are more questions and I see them, and I apologize that we can't get to you, but we will be putting together another event, like I'm going to call it office hours, where we can just talk and have questions. But thank you, panelists, so much and for this. And also the next panel is coming up, and also tomorrow, the People's Budget. That's another really powerful panel that will be coming up tomorrow at 2 p.m. with our very own Baba Akili and Melina Abdullah from Black Lives Matter. You know, the People's Budget is going to be, it's historical moment right now. So please check into that too. Once again, like, I'm just touched at the bottom of my heart, you know, that there is so much support coming, not just from the Black community this time. We have a lot of allies here on this call that are supporting us and supporting this movement and supporting single payer. And it's just beyond inspiring. Whether or not who gives a fuck who's in the White House, we're going to do it right here in California, okay?
Amen. Amen.
Thank you guys so much.
Can we just do a cheer? Single California, single payer now.
Single payer now.
Single payer now. Single payer now. Oh, single payer now. Thank you, everyone. I love you all.
I'm on my way to Camas and Southgate, but I really appreciate being invited on, and it's an honor to be on here with Baba Akili and Dr. Paul Song and Dr. Bill, who I love, and Dr. What's his name? Dr. Bill, and the doctor in Sacramento was super nice guy. Yes, yes. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Have a great afternoon, and stay cool out there. It's about 100 outside right now. So
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, take care, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
John Lewis, who said you must be bold, brave, and courageous, and you must find a way to get in the way.
Woo!